Every TV show has episodes that just feel off. Some of them are just weird crossovers, while others take dark turns no one expects to see. And some of them are so bizarre that they actually just get banned. These are the ones we've never been able to shake.
In each episode of Quantum Leap, Dr. Sam Beckett jumped into a different person's body at different points in history,
striving to put right what once went wrong.
Once the historical catastrophe was averted, he'd leap to someone else, say his famous "oh boy" catchphrase, and begin the next adventure. Along the way, he was aided by his best friend Al, a hologram from the future. Due to its time travel format, Quantum Leap jumped freely between many genres. In one haunted house episode, Sam leaps into the body of a horror novelist. While he's usually there to save lives, he's unable to prevent people from dying all around him. But then it's also revealed that Sam's holographic buddy Al has been possessed by the devil, who then tries to murder Sam. It gets intense, but don't worry, because it's Quantum Leap, things turn out okay in the end. The show even throws in a fun Stephen King reference.
Stevie King.
Hey, Cujo!
The heart of Roseanne was always the working-class relationship between the title character and her husband Dan. That is, until the final season, where a surprise lottery win turns the family into millionaires, leading to bizarre wealthy celebrity hijinks. The series finale hits viewers with the biggest plot twist of the series. The whole last season was a novel written by Roseanne, who never won the lottery at all. Apparently, Roseanne's fiction writing habit is her way of coping with the loss of Dan, who had actually died of a heart attack in the previous season.
My writing's really what got me through the last year after Dan died.
In about 2 minutes, the entire run of the show goes from comedy to tragedy. For what it's worth, the 2018 Roseanne revival showed Dan to still be alive. Of course, then Roseanne herself was written off the show due to her own questionable comments. That's a different kind of dark. From start to finish, Seinfeld was snarky and witty and treated every situation like a joke. However, in one episode from 1992, the show got a little too real for comfort. The opera is all about Crazy Joe Davola, who'd seem more at home in Silence of the Lambs than Monk's Cafe. The insanity starts when Crazy Joe phones up Jerry, leaving a message where he threatens him.
Now I'm gonna put the kibosh on you.
Crazy Joe has also been stalking Elaine, plastering countless photographs of her face across his apartment walls. From there, he spends the rest of the episode acting like a genuine serial killer, finally disguising himself in a clown costume and scaring Kramer. The laugh track only makes the whole thing even more disturbing. The worst part? At the end of the episode, Crazy Joe is still at large. Frasier, one of the most low-key sitcoms of all time, found fancy and erudite Frasier Crane living in quiet, rainy Seattle, working as a psychiatrist on a radio call-in show, and hanging out in a coffee shop with his even fussier brother Niles. Frasier may have been middle-aged, divorced, balding, and self-absorbed, but none of that was going to stop him from trying to bed as many beautiful and intelligent women as possible. In the 1994 episode Slow Tango in South Seattle, an old psychiatric patient played by John O'Hurley, who Frasier helped to conquer writer's block, has apparently lifted the story of Frasier losing his virginity and turned it into a best-selling work of romantic fiction. At first enraged by this violation of privacy, Frasier instead sets out to track down his first partner and thank her for making a man out of him. It turns out the woman was his 40-year-old piano teacher, and she seduced Frasier when he was 18.
I wasn't interested in 40-year-old men then, and I guess I'm still not.
Friends is a TV show that purported to depict the life of single 20-somethings in, well, a group of friends. But it was a pretty weird show during its first season. For example, Ross had a pet monkey, which is not a normal thing people did in the go-go 90s. Also, there's that episode where Monica deflowers a minor. At least producers knew they were getting weird. They titled it The One with the Ick Factor, after all. Monica, years from finding true love with Chandler, dates a younger guy named Ethan. He's a senior in what Monica thinks is college, and so she lies too.
It's not even an issue, because I told him I was 22.
She's actually 26. They soon physically consummate their relationship, and after the deed is done, Monica tells Ethan her real age. That's when he admits he told a lie too. He's a senior in high school, and also he's 17. That's a deal breaker for Monica, who somehow avoids prison. The Golden Girls is a cult classic about Miami housemates Dorothy, Rose, Sophia, and Blanche who dated, dealt with the perils of aging, sass-mouthed each other, and ate a cheesecake in the middle of the night. The show also delivered an episode about the AIDS crisis. The 1990 installment 72 Hours found Rose, played by Betty White, grappling with the news that the blood transfusion she'd received during a surgery years prior may have been tainted with HIV. She gets tested and has to wait 72 frightening hours for the result. Rose endures mental and emotional anguish throughout, and at one point declares that she's a good person and doesn't deserve to get AIDS. Blanche thoughtfully replies,
AIDS is not a bad person's disease, Rose. It is not God punishing people for their sins.
Powerful statement made. And of course, Rose didn't get AIDS after all. It was a comedy show. The 1990 Full House episode Shape Up nobly demonstrates eating disorder warning signs to parents of teens and tweens, framed around DJ Tanner's invitation to her best friend Kimmy Gibbler's pool party. Realizing she'll have to wear a swimsuit in public, DJ feels some toxic body shame and becomes obsessed with losing weight as quickly as possible. She posts photos of rail-thin models on the fridge to discourage herself from eating, eats ice on a stick, feeds her sandwich to the dog, and then stops eating altogether. The family realizes she has a serious problem when she collapses after working out too hard on a treadmill. Rather than seek treatment for DJ's eating disorder, Dad Danny Tanner talks to her.
But how a person looks on the outside isn't nearly as important as who they are on the inside.
Because things had to wrap up in 30 minutes, she's immediately cured and announces her intention to attend the pool party and just have fun. Problem solved? The 1995 movie Clueless was so popular with 90s teens that ABC and later UPN adapted it into a TV series. Stacey Dash, Elisa Donovan, and Donald Faison reprised roles from the movie, while Rachel Blanchard took over for Alicia Silverstone as Cher Horowitz. The movie was based on Jane Austen's Emma, so the show ran out of source material pretty quickly, but a very special episode in 1999 tackled the perils of drunk driving. Cher's friends throw her a huge 18th birthday party. It's so 90s that NSYNC even shows up. Cher, Murray, Sean, and Cher's boyfriend of the moment, Adam, party hard and get drunk. Everyone but Cher tries to drive home.
Look, Cher, there's been an accident.
While Murray walks away, Sean and Adam get hospitalized, and a short time later, Adam dies from undiagnosed internal injuries. That sure doesn't happen in Emma. Before it became a soap opera about young, sun-kissed Californians, Beverly Hills 90210 was about goofy high school kids who happened to have excellent haircuts and designer clothes. One plot thread involved cool and popular David Silver still hanging around with his sort of nerdy pal Scott Scanlon. During season 2, Douglas Emerson, who played Scott, wanted to leave the show, so the writers wrote him out in a very big way. Scott's mom asks David and Donna to plan Scott's big 16th birthday party, and they throw a big bash. But Scott, ever the misfit, sneaks away and rummages through a desk drawer where he finds a gun. He plays around with it, and shockingly, accidentally shoots himself dead on his birthday. The boy of Boy Meets World is Corey Matthews, a Philadelphia tween who learns something new about the world each episode. The sitcom series tracked the development of Corey's relationship with Topanga, from classmate to crush to girlfriend to wife. But it's really a series about the bromance between Corey and his ride-or-die best pal Sean. In one episode, Sean gets mixed up with The Center, a live-in church led by the charismatic Mr. Mack, where adherents spout creepy platitudes like,
"That a hug is a burst of pure love."
Sean gets hopelessly brainwashed into the Center's way. Before long, Corey is struggling to find a way to deprogram his best friend, but the universe takes care of things. After Sean's favorite teacher gets into a gruesome motorcycle accident, he snaps out of it. Perhaps the most shocking thing in this 1996 episode of Home Improvement is that bumbling dad Tim the Toolman Taylor has to stop grunting like a caveman and act like a sensitive, modern man for a hot minute. In The Longest Day, Tim's son Randy goes in for a routine medical checkup. The doctor's office calls and tells Randy's parents that there's a possibility their boy may have potentially fatal thyroid cancer.
You know, if I didn't know better, I think I was dying.
The family has to wait for test results to come in while the two frightened parents contemplate the death of their child, and Randy worries that he's going to die. Everything turns out fine, of course, but The Longest Day feels like the longest Home Improvement episode. Saved by the Bell exists in a bizarro version of the 90s where teens experienced zero repercussions for constantly scamming their principal, who is also their best friend. Bayside High was a strange place to be sure, but it was nearly torn asunder by the cold claw of addiction in the November 1990 episode Jessie's Song. Overachiever Jessie bites off more than she can chew, trying to balance her high level of commitment to school and singing in Hot Sunday, the cover group she's formed with Kelly and Lisa. There aren't enough hours in the day, so Jessie turns to caffeine pills for energy. In a terrifying TV moment, she experiences a panic attack and scream sings, "I'm so excited."
I'm so excited! I'm so excited! I'm so scared!
A caffeine binge would result in agitation and a headache, not a full-on freakout, but it's all because standards and practices wouldn't allow what the writers had originally plotted, an addiction to speed. Still, the show does make a point about how kids like Jessie can easily burn out trying to meet high expectations.
On the surface, Dinosaurs seems like an average sitcom. It's got a working-class dad named Earl Sinclair, his wife Franny, and their 3 kids. They actually have a lot in common with The Simpsons, except for the part where they're prehistoric reptiles created by the Jim Henson Company. Yeah, Dinosaurs was a weird show, but it managed to stay on the air for 65 episodes and maintained such a fun tone that looking back, you almost forget that the show ended with the entire family's grisly, cold, heartbreaking demise. The series finale, Changing Nature, ends with the start of an ice age. If that wasn't bad enough, it's shown that the worldwide climate catastrophe is Earl's fault, or, well, the fault of the company he works for. The final episode closes with the Sinclair family huddled together during the blizzard.
After all, dinosaurs have been on this earth for 150 million years. And it's not like we're going to just disappear.
It's a depressing ending, but it's an incredibly effective one. And hey, they're dinosaurs. You can't say that you didn't see it coming. 90s kids love Batman the animated series, but what made the show a classic was its courageous exploration of mature themes like trauma, loss, identity crisis, and more. That all comes together in the show's most intense episode, Over the Edge, which shows a horrific implosion in the relationship between Batman and his eternal ally, Commissioner Gordon. The reason? Gordon's daughter Barbara, better known as Batgirl, is killed by the Scarecrow, and she dies in her father's arms. Gordon blames Batman and swears to destroy everything the Dark Knight stands for. It's thrilling but painful to watch. The Joker's a scary guy, but even his machinations can't compare to the gut-wrenching sight of Jim Gordon blowing up the Batcave or striking deals with criminals to murder Batman. The good news is that it all turns out to be a dream brought on by the Scarecrow, showing viewers Batgirl's worst fears about what her vigilante career could cost. Still, superhero cartoons don't get much darker than this. Nothing turns a wholesome family sitcom into a terrifying creepshow like a good Halloween episode. But Family Matters got so creepy that Freddy Krueger would probably run away crying into his claws.
Tonight's episode of Family Matters is a little scary, so you might want to watch it with somebody brave.
Stevil is the name of a demonically possessed ventriloquist dummy who just happens to look exactly like Steve Urkel, the show's nerdy star character. Now, as we all know from The Twilight Zone, ventriloquist dummies are already creepy enough as it is. This doll, though, is like something crafted in the bowels of hell. His voice alone would be enough to make countless children hide under the bed.
You just got what you wished for, pal.
After he comes to life, the dummy proceeds to systematically torture, play with, and murder the entire cast of the show. So yes, for one episode, Family Matters literally turned into a slasher movie. Once again, this ends up being a dream sequence, but try telling that to the traumatized young Urkel fan who didn't make it to the end of the episode. For an alien life form who spent most of his time plotting to eat the family cat, Alf was a pretty lovable dude. It's a shame that the government had a specialized task force dedicated to kidnapping Alf so they could subject him to tortures like freezing, electrical shock, and dissection. These were the horrific circumstances that prompted the Tanner family to take Alf into the fold and protect him as one of their own. Heartwarming stuff, right? Wrong. In the final episode, Alf was finally called up by his fellow aliens and allowed to leave Earth. But unlike E.T., Alf doesn't get to go home. He misses his flight and the alien task force finally catches up to him. Surrounding him with guns, fade to black. The ending was supposed to be a cliffhanger for the next season, but the show ended there, with viewers forced to imagine the alien they'd come to love being cut open like the gray guy in Alien Autopsy. A follow-up TV movie came out in 1996 that even acknowledged the experiments, but by that point, everyone had moved on. 90s series finales were rough. Star Trek is a bastion of hope and optimism, and while Deep Space Nine mostly stayed true to that vision, it wasn't afraid to test the boundaries. The series takes place near the planet Bajor, which has only recently been freed from decades of cruel occupation by the militaristic Cardassians. Political and religious allegories abounded, and one of the show's prominent heroes was Major Kira Nerys, a deeply religious former Bajoran freedom fighter. Or was she a terrorist? Deep Space Nine was never afraid to challenge moral assumptions. While the Cardassian occupation itself was unquestionably immoral, the episode The Darkness and the Light went deeper than most TV programs ever would, by also holding up a mirror to Kira's actions as a rebel. In another episode, Defiant, she even refers to herself as a terrorist.
I know I was a terrorist, and if I'd had this ship then...
Overall, the show mostly sides with Kira. Her people were being oppressed, and she had to fight back, even if it meant spilling Cardassian blood. However, DS9's writers pointedly examine the fact that Kira is so unrepentant, particularly when she's interrogated by a Cardassian who claims he did everything he could to spare Bajoran lives. There are no easy answers here, and that's exactly why fans love DS9. Few shows epitomize the 90s as much as The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Everyone who grew up in that decade knows the lyrics to the theme song by heart, and the series introduced the world to Will Smith, the movie star of all movie stars. Even though the show usually stuck to wacky sitcom hijinks, there were a few dramatic moments, like the classic episode about Will's breakdown over being rejected by his father.
How come you don't want me, man?
But things got even darker when Will takes a bullet for Carlton during a mugging gone wrong. Will survives, but he does get hospitalized. Later on, Carlton visits Will at his hospital bed and tells Will that he bought a gun to protect them if it ever happens again. Rather than being impressed, Will is furious and he demands that Carlton leave the gun behind. Carlton stomps off but does as Will asks. The scene ends up with Will choking up as he empties the bullets from the chamber. The whole sequence is as emotional as a TV program can get. While Fresh Prince went back to being funny after that, these darker moments are some of the big ones fans remember today.
Let's face it, crossover episodes totally rule. Everyone loves watching their favorite characters from one TV show suddenly get thrown into another. But sometimes writers get really odd ideas about which shows should cross paths. After several years in development, a 2018 episode of Supernatural featured the Winchester brothers getting sucked into a television and subsequently turned into cartoon versions of themselves. The next thing you know, they're teaming up with the Scooby Doo gang to solve a dastardly mystery. The result is actually pretty darn great. This crazy crossover hits all the right notes, particularly if you're a Scooby Doo fan. At one point, the gang even evades a ghastly ghoul by zipping in and out through various Scooby Doo doors, which is the ultimate running gag. We also get to witness Dean wolf down ridiculously huge sandwiches with Shaggy. And of course, this is said at one point.
Would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those meddling kids.
Ooh, he said it.
Best of all, the episode never betrays the original cartoon's lighthearted tone. As executive producer Andrew Dabb told USA Today, while this is a slightly more adult version of Scooby-Doo, we didn't want to make it this grim and gritty Dark Knight Returns take where Shaggy's got one eye and Velma smokes a cigarette. Good call on that one. These days, The X-Files is such a cultural institution that it's easy to forget just how weird and wonderful the show really is. Take the episode X-Cops, which combined The X-Files with that trashy reality TV show that launched in 1989, Cops. As you may recall, Cops involved real-life police officers busting innumerable frazzled perps. Well, talk about two tastes that taste great together. We're even treated to the Cops theme song in the show's opening moments. And we get those police lights when it's time for a commercial break, although they're superimposed over the X-Files logo. Of course, the LAPD officers here are all played by actors, and they're being assisted by Scully and Mulder, who are in hot pursuit of a scary werewolf.
Wetzel, don't be afraid! It can't hurt you!
Postmodern? Definitely. Weird? Indeed. By rights, this bizarre mashup shouldn't have worked at all, but thanks to Gilligan's deft touch, it quickly became a fan-favorite episode. Mr. Robot is a sharp, politically charged TV series about a rebellious computer programmer named Elliot, played by Rami Malek. Long story short, Elliot uses his genius tech skills to face off against evil corporate overlords. It's edgy and stylish, but ultimately rather somber stuff. It's definitely not the sort of show where you'd expect to meet Alf, the furry alien blowhard who loves to eat cats. But here we are. In 2016, Alf appeared on Mr. Robot, and the segment is just as bizarre as it sounds. To be fair, the whole shebang is basically one of Elliot's many hallucinations. It's not like they bulldozed the entire story just for this one bizarre cameo. Still, that doesn't make it any less surreal to watch Alf as he runs over Gideon, casually goes shopping, and riffs on one of his favorite catchphrases.
No problemy, Meister.
Even by Mr. Robot standards, this is a super strange plot wrinkle. Michael Scott, the awkward dude played by Steve Carell in the American version of The Office, is not really the world's best boss. And neither is David Brent, his equally awkward equivalent in the original British program played by Ricky Gervais. A meeting between both men could only be, well, super awkward. And that's exactly what it was when the two characters had a surprise elevator encounter in a 2011 episode. But rather than going down a predictable path, like, say, Scott and Brent having a petty squabble in the hall, the brief encounter is surprisingly upbeat. The two men laugh, trade stories, and even bond over a groan-worthy joke.
No, comedy is a place where the mind goes to tickle itself. That's what she said.
Fans had wanted to see this surreal pair-up for years, which is why it's a shame that Gervais's surprise appearance was leaked before the episode premiered. Still, the scene really couldn't have been more perfect. That said, the idea of Scott and Brent occupying the same universe raises a few continuity questions. After all, the events in the US pilot episode of The Office deliberately mirror those of the English one, sometimes right down to the dialogue. So it's rather odd that these two men meet one another, and all while being filmed for two different documentaries about two different, equally dismal offices. Perhaps it's best not to overthink this one too much. If you happen to remember any episode of NBC's 90s sitcom Mad About You, it's probably the 1992 episode The Apartment. The episode centers around an argument between lead characters Paul and Jamie when the latter realizes her husband never let the lease expire on his old bachelor pad. Instead, he's been subletting it for years, just in case their relationship falls apart and he suddenly finds himself needing to move. By the end of the episode, Paul decides to give up the apartment to its current subletter. To confirm this, he visits the old place, knocks on the door, and guess who answers? None other than Seinfeld character Cosmo Kramer, played by Michael Richards.
Is this yours? I don't believe so. It's weird. I don't know where it came from.
What a scream. As cool as the crossover hoped to be, NBC kinda killed the fun by overhyping it in a slew of promotions. Not only did they ruin the surprise, they set expectations way too high for this super short scene. Oh well, we'll get over it one day. Ask any diehard Friends fan whether Phoebe has any siblings, and they'll probably tell you all about her sinister twin sister, Ursula. In fact, Ursula existed as a fictional character long before Phoebe ever did, and the first time we met her wasn't on Friends. No, it was on Mad About You, a show that none of us will be able to escape in our lifetimes, apparently. In fact, Mad About You premiered in 1992, a few years before Friends came around in 1994. Actress Lisa Kudrow nabbed the role of Ursula long before getting cast as Phoebe. And once Friends became a monster hit, everyone realized that Kudrow playing two different roles on two different NBC sitcoms might be weird for audiences, particularly since the shows aired back-to-back. So the writers cooked up a simple solution. They rewrote Phoebe and Ursula as twins, thereby linking the Friends and Mad About You universes together. In the Season 1 Friends episode, The One with Two Parts, Part 1, all sorts of hilarity ensues when Helen Hunt makes an appearance as her Mad About You character, Jamie, and mistakes Phoebe for Ursula.
Hi, it's us. Right, and it's me.
Earlier in the same episode, Joey and Chandler are similarly confused when they mistake Ursula for Phoebe.
Wait, what are you doing here?
Yeah, I was over there, and then you said, "Excuse me, hello, miss," so now I'm here.
No. How come you're working here?
Throughout the 90s, Jim Carrey mugged his way through a number of films, including The Mask and Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. The supernatural vigilante and goofy animal detective really don't have too much in common beyond the actor who originally played them, but the characters did appear together in cartoon form. Twice, actually. The first time was in an episode of The Mask the Animated Series entitled The Ace Man Cometh. Then the adventure, such as it was, continued in the Ace Ventura Pet Detective episode Have Mask Will Travel. Sounds fun in theory, but this animated crossover was missing a key ingredient, namely Jim Carrey. Ventura was voiced by Michael Dangerfield, while Rob Paulsen voiced The Mask. As a result, this not-so-epic crossover basically found two voice actors bouncing their best Jim Carrey impersonations off one another. Still, this two-parter is a fun novelty, if you can accept it for what it is.
Alrighty then.
In a 2000 episode of Star Trek Voyager, 7 of 9 is captured, imprisoned, and forced to fight a character played by The Rock, otherwise known as Dwayne Johnson. As you can see, he's quite clearly wearing some pronounced forehead bumps, and he's called a Pindari throughout the episode, presumably to prevent the Star Trek timeline from getting irreparably torn asunder.
I assure you, resistance is futile.
So is all your talk.
But Dwayne Johnson is definitely doing his rock act as only Dwayne Johnson can. It's a deeply strange episode, and it marks one of the first times Johnson acted outside of his wrestling wheelhouse as anyone but himself. The episode aired a full year before The Mummy Returns turned him into a bona fide movie star. That cocky swagger was a clear sign that bigger and theoretically better roles awaited. Back in the early 90s, NBC was airing 3 spin-off sitcoms all set in the same universe of Miami, Florida: Golden Girls, Empty Nest, and Nurses. On November 9th, 1991, the powers that be decided to have all 3 shows host a truly bizarre event that they called Hurricane Saturday. The whole thing was an interminable TV event that really had to be seen to be believed.
Saturday, a 2-hour television event comes to NBC when the Golden Girls, Empty Nest, and Nurses get hit by a hurricane.
Long story short, the characters in each series had to survive the trauma of not 1 but 2 fictional hurricanes hitting in rapid succession. It would be remiss not to tell you that their names were Hurricane Gil and Hurricane Heidi.
Carol, guess what? I just heard on the radio, Hurricane Heidi's changed direction and it's headed straight for us.
Throughout this double whammy disaster, several characters cross over from one show to another. Fortunately, no one got hurt, except the people who tuned in to watch. Hurricane Saturday turned out to be a huge success, so NBC tried it again in 1994. And this time, the disaster was called Blackout Thursday.
Thursday, the lights go out on NBC. It's Blackout Thursday. Blackout! It's comedy in the dark. Blackout.
Oh, and guess what? The whole event starts when Mad About You's Jamie Buckman accidentally causes a major blackout in New York City. Yes, it's her again. The blackout ends up seriously impacting the Friends characters, too. Remember when Chandler gets stuck inside that ATM booth? You can blame Jamie for that. In fact, at this point, you can blame Jamie for all your problems. The blackout carried over into the short-lived Dabney Coleman sitcom Madman of the People, but the folks at Seinfeld totally opted out, which was perhaps wise. Believe it or not, this kind of stunt was replicated, or at least parodied, a 3rd time in 2011. The Fox event, Night of the Hurricane, crossed over Family Guy, American Dad, and The Cleveland Show. Nothing like a natural disaster to bring all your favorite and least favorite characters together. The Flintstones premiered in 1960, and the Jetsons hit the tube 2 short years later. But somehow it took almost 3 decades for the prehistoric clan to meet the far-out family from the future. Well, it finally happened in the 1987 TV movie The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones. The plot involves Elroy and crew getting mixed up in a time machine malfunction that accidentally shuttles them to the prehistoric era.
Maybe we've gone so far into the future, the time has started all over again.
As you probably guessed, the 2 families become fast friends. But that's not to say their meetup is smooth sailing all the way.
Hold it. Hold it. I said hold it, not disappear.
The best children's programming astutely blends humor for kids with jokes that even a jaded parent can appreciate. But a few moments deemed too risque for sensitive audiences can sometimes slip past the in-network censors, causing minor public relations nightmares, and leading the offending material to be pulled from the airwaves. Here are a few shows that went too far. The original Mighty Mouse was launched in the 1940s as a mousy knockoff of everyone's favorite underpants-clad Kryptonian, Superman. In the late 80s, the character was revived in The New Adventures, which lasted all of 2 seasons, and featured notorious Ren and Stimpy creator John Kay behind the storyboards. One episode in particular garnered a significant amount of unwanted attention. The Littlest Tramp includes a brief sequence where the hero takes a nice long sniff of a fragrant flower. While watching the episode in 1988, a family became concerned that the petals seemed a little too much like a powdery white substance. Amid the feverishly anti-drug 80s, the public jumped all over the show. Bowing to public pressure, the episode was re-edited to remove the contentious scene.
Being original. Say no to peer pressure.
On the cusp of a new millennium and chock full of girl power, the Powerpuff Girls combined entertaining storytelling with highly stylized animation. But even the pint-sized crime fighters weren't entirely immune to controversy. Initially intended to wrap up the 5th season, See Me, Feel Me, Know Me was a rock opera featuring the villainous Gnome. A crushing defeat leaves the girls depressed and searching for answers. The tiny terror first appears friendly, promising them world peace in exchange for giving up their powers. Unfortunately, his idea of world peace is more of a totalitarian state, where the citizens of Townsville turn into a gnome-worshipping cult. Although the episode aired in other countries, it wasn't released in the United States at all. Some claimed it was because of a pro-communism ideology, especially in light of the red outfits the cult members wear. Others claimed the episode was banned due to the strobe effects potentially causing epileptic seizures. But creator Craig McCracken disputes these claims on his personal blog, revealing the real reason behind the pulled episode, saying, "They banned it because they claim that the metal beams in the destroyed buildings look too much like crosses, and one of the hippies looked like Jesus." Despite its progressive outlook, including a well-characterized lesbian relationship between extraterrestrials Ruby and Sapphire as a part of the fabric of daily life, Steven Universe has mostly marched along without a hiccup. However, the episode We Need to Talk did not fare as well in the United Kingdom. During one of the musical numbers, Pearl shares a very close but sweet dance with Steven's mother, Rose. Apparently, the scene made the heads of Cartoon Network UK a tad uncomfortable. As a result, they pulled the episode, cropping about 3 seconds of the footage before broadcast. After the move stirred ire from fans, the network claimed their edited version was more comfortable for local kids and their parents.
It's hard to beat the original.
The bubbly Disney Channel sitcom Shake It Up followed a duo of would-be dancers on their misadventures as they sought fame and fortune. During a model soiree sequence in the episode Party It Up, one of the shallow model types quips at the duo,
"I could just eat you guys up. You know, if I ate."
After the show aired in 2011, singer Demi Lovato took to Twitter with her own not-so-amused comeback, saying, "I find it really funny how a company can lose one of their actresses from the pressures of an eating disorder and yet still make a joke about that very disease. #nice. Lovato, who starred on Disney Channel's Sunny with a Chance, has been public about her own battles with bulimia. After her scathing remarks, Disney Channel PR's Twitter outlet responded stating, "It's never our intention to make light of eating disorders." The episode was then pulled, stripped of the insensitive remarks, and returned to circulation. Fred Rogers typically kept his messages and episodes relatively evergreen. One of the few times he did address current concerns happened during the height of Cold War tensions, and it ruffled quite a few feathers. In the Lost Story arc Conflict from 1983, King Friday and Prince Tuesday mistake the contents of a mysterious package, fearing that the neighborhood beaver Corny is secretly building a bomb. This sets off a week-long narrative about paranoia, misunderstandings, and diplomacy, rendered in all their puppety glory. Thankfully, cooler heads prevail, and kids learn a valuable lesson about love triumphing over misunderstandings and mistrust. PBS pulled the controversial episodes in 1996, reportedly due to their subject matter, and they didn't resurface until recently. Sometimes, it's not such a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
I made a very bad mistake.
The last episode of South Park's 14th season aired only once in the US in 2010, and even then, it was heavily censored. Their offense? They attempted to satirically address extremist outrage over the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad.
Against the creators of South Park, a warning by a radical Islamic group right here in America, right here in New York, that they will end up dead because of a cartoon.
Comedy Central wasn't willing to take the risk of airing the unedited episode, already facing death threats from extremist groups, so it bleeped out any potentially offending dialogue as well as all depictions of the Prophet. Viewers were left with a whole lot of this.
You see, I learned something today.
Comedy Central even took it a step further and censored Matt Stone and Trey Parker's commentary on the DVD release, and omitted the episode from the DVDs that would be sold in certain parts of the world. It was a particularly tough defeat for the guys known for pushing the envelope, but on the bright side, they weren't murdered for blasphemy, so that's a plus. If the words 2007 Boston Moonanite Panic sounds ridiculous, it's because, well, the whole thing was ridiculous. In January of 2007, promoters of the Adult Swim show Aqua Teen Hunger Force hung light-up LED plaques in cities throughout the U.S. in order to advertise the upcoming Aqua Teen movie, which featured the Moonanites.
Our vertical leap is beyond all measurement.
So what you're saying is your culture is more advanced because you can jump higher?
Yes, observe.
While most cities were bemused, Boston went bananas and called in Homeland Security, believing the adorable plaques to be bombs. The whole incident ended up costing $2 million in fines and settlement fees, so when it came to air a parody episode a year later, Turner Broadcasting, which owns Cartoon Network and Adult Swim, refused.
Turn on your tiny magnetic lights. That way, you look more like a device.
There we go. While the marketing stunt ironically worked much better than they probably ever hoped for, Boston later suffered an actual very serious terrorist attack using an improvised explosive. If you're desperate to see a show that even remotely mocks anything close to either of those incidents being shown on actual television, don't hold your breath. Or just go to the internet, where people's deepest secrets and shames live on forever. Cartoon Network was known for getting away with a lot of questionable content in the late 90s, including some of the most eerily terrifying moments in any kid's program. In addition to giving everyone nightmares forever, Cartoon Network also ended up being responsible for a number of animated episodes that were banned after a single airing. One of the most notorious examples comes from the Dexter's Laboratory spin-off segment Dial M for Monkey. It's widely rumored that the episode called Barbequor was banned throughout North and South America because of two characters in particular. Silver Spooner, who was created as an offensively flamboyant gay stereotype,
Let the feast begin!
And Crunk, who gets drunk and throws up. Both characters were probably a bit too much to appear on one episode of a show ostensibly for children. Other rumors claim that the segment was banned because of Barbequor, a parody of Marvel's Galactus, which reportedly upset the publisher. There's more credence to that second rumor, especially because the Tick animated series ran into similar problems. The 1995 episode Alone Together, which features a Galactus parody named Omnipotus, was never released on DVD for allegedly similar reasons. And we probably can't even talk in detail about why the Cow and the Chicken episode Buffalo Gals was only aired once, but it's pretty much all about lesbian stereotypes.
Oh, the Buffalo Gals! A motorcycle riding gang that randomly bursts into people's homes and chews on their carpets!
Wow. Banned cartoons aren't always trying to slip euphemisms through the censors. Sometimes they're really trying to impart a positive message, just in the absolute worst way.
Look, the storm knocked down that big wire. Hey, let's jump our bikes over it.
The 1991 Tiny Toon Adventures episode titled Elephant Issues goes just a little overboard by murdering half of its youthful animal stars, but it's for good reason, right? Right? The whole episode contains two other segments about social issues, but it's the one called One Beer that got the whole thing taken off the air after just one showing. Since three underage characters get drunk in public, steal a police car, drive it off a cliff, and die. In fairness, the episode began with a warning that it was going to be addressing relevant issues. But maybe the alcohol abuse segment could have dipped its toe into areas like hangovers or job loss before diving right into the hilarious punchline of vehicular manslaughter.
So do we get to do a funny episode tomorrow? I hope so.
It's hard to believe the toddler show Peppa Pig is no stranger to controversy either. The cartoon character has been accused by News Corp madman Piers Ackerman of being a Marxist, Leninist, and feminist extremist. The show was also ridiculously accused of causing autism in children when many news outlets republished a satirical article from a made-up university. However, there's one example of poor Peppa being banned from television that's actually kind of justifiable. The 2012 episode Mr. Skinnylegs features the porcine family befriending a spider with the implication that arachnids are our friends and nothing to be afraid of. It's a harmless enough message for kids in the UK and even most of the US, but a potentially deadly message to send to children in Australia, which is home to some of the most venomous spiders in the world. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation restricted airing of the episode on its networks, but still accidentally published it online due to a technical error. Viewers quickly complained and had the episode removed, rightly terrified of Australian toddlers trying to make friends with deadly funnel web or redback spiders. Only ever airing once in Japan in 1997, Pokémon's Electric Soldier Porygon is probably the best-known banned cartoon, since it actually caused a medical crisis, reportedly sending over 600 kids to the hospital. After a scene that featured a flashing strobe-like effect with multicolored lights, kids started experiencing vision problems, headaches, and nausea, with some actually having to be treated for seizures. The incident got worldwide media attention because it's not every day a TV show shocks people into a physical health emergency. Nintendo's stock shares dropped 5%, press conferences were held, and new animation guidelines were even made with medical professionals. The Cubist Electro Duck Pokemon Porygon was dropped from all future episodes, and the original episode was never aired outside of Japan. Giving kids seizures kind of makes all the Pokemon episodes banned because of guns, subtle racism, and huge inflatable breasts pale in comparison. Of course, if you think all these cartoons were banned for ridiculous reasons, just wait till you hear about the banned shows featuring actual people. Muppet and Sesame Street creator Jim Henson was born in Mississippi, and the town of Leland, Mississippi has a totally sweet public plaque declaring themselves the birthplace of universally loved frog nerd Kermit.
I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks.
Needless to say, there's some definite hometown pride for Henson. But in 1970, the state of Mississippi actually banned Sesame Street from public television for a whopping 22 days, for probably one of the worst reasons possible. A lobbyist group spearheaded by the bored former mayor of Jackson, Alan Cavett Thompson, who apparently hated all things beautiful, decided that public funds shouldn't be used to create a show with such a highly integrated cast of children. In plain English, the show was taken off the air in one state because of old-fashioned racism, and it wasn't even against blue-skinned Muppets. After a member of the commission leaked the story to the New York Times, nationwide outrage ensued, and the ban was lifted. It ain't easy being green. After gaining the power to hear people's thoughts, Buffy thinks she overhears a student planning a mass murder.
This time tomorrow, I'll kill you all.
Joke's on her. The student is just planning to commit suicide, and it's actually the lunch lady who's going to commit mass murder in a school. While that's a pretty grim storyline even for a horror comedy show, the Buffy episode Earshot probably would have made it to air if it wasn't scheduled for the week after the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. The network pulled the episode before it aired and waited a tactful 5 months before showing it because that was probably enough time for anyone traumatized by the real-life tragedy to handle seeing a character holding a rifle in a school's clock tower. As far as episode bans go, this one may have been unnecessarily soft. Fun fact, the 1996 X-Files episode Home was the first network TV episode to ever earn the now ubiquitous TVMA rating. So it's probably not surprising that the episode rarely aired on Fox, and only ever did so with a special warning. Not so fun fact, it's because the entire episode was about a deranged backwoods family who liked making babies with each other, killing people, and killing their own babies. The gruesome violence and weird sexual themes of Home were, unsurprisingly for X-Files fans, reviewed very favorably. But being slapped with a mature rating from censors was enough to scare the network from ever running Home again, though it did eventually reappear in syndication. It's now considered a cult classic, and some would argue the best episode in the history of the series, even though it has nothing to do with aliens, conspiracies, or anything remotely supernatural. Turns out people would rather watch inbred monsters murder a bunch of people than discover if the truth is really out there.